The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the quiet suburban street, where families strolled, kids rode bikes, and everything seemed peaceful, until the sound of roaring engines shattered the calm. A gang of bikers stormed into the neighborhood, their loud laughter and aggressive stunts leaving an uneasy tension in the air. They didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. Among them, a few neighbors peered through their curtains, worried but unwilling to confront the group. The bikers, with their matching leather jackets and intimidating presence, seemed to thrive on the fear they created. One of them revved his engine loudly in front of a parked car, while another kicked over a trash can for fun. But not everyone in this neighborhood was about to let them run wild. Inside a modest brick house, a man named Jake watched the scene unfold. Jake wasn't your average suburban resident. A former army paramedic, he had seen and handled situations far more dangerous than this. Calm under pressure, Jake was known for his quiet strength and unshakable sense of justice. To the bikers, he was just another guy in a t-shirt and jeans, a nobody. But they had no idea what they were about to face. Jake stepped outside, his gaze steady and unwavering as he approached the group. The bikers, caught off guard by his confidence, turned their attention to him, smirking and making jokes under their breath. "What's the matter, old man?" one of them sneered. Jake didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his voice calm but firm as he said, "You're disturbing the peace. Leave now." The tension in the air was thick as the bikers exchanged glances, clearly deciding whether to back down or double down. Little did they know, they had just picked the wrong person to mess with. The leader of the bikers, a burly man with a thick beard and dark sunglasses, stepped forward. His boots crunched on the pavement as he sized Jake up, the faintest smirk playing on his lips. "You got some nerve, old man," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Think you can tell us what to do?" Jake remained calm, his hands resting by his sides. He wasn't one to make a scene, but he also wasn't one to back down when his neighborhood, and the people in it, were being threatened. "I'm not telling you," Jake replied evenly. "I'm asking you. Respect this neighborhood and move on." The other bikers chuckled, their laughter echoing through the street. A few of them revved their engines, as if trying to intimidate him. One of them even said, "You think you're some kind of hero?" Jake didn't respond to the taunts. He didn't need to. What these men didn't know, and couldn't tell from looking at him, was that Jake had faced much worse in his time. As an army paramedic, he had been stationed in some of the most dangerous places in the world, saving lives under fire and staying calm in chaos. Those years had taught him patience, resilience, and how to handle men who thought their strength came from intimidation. Behind the curtains of the houses lining the street, the neighbors watched anxiously, unsure of what might happen next. Some whispered among themselves, debating whether to call the police, but none dared to step outside. The leader of the bikers stepped closer to Jake, close enough that their faces were mere inches apart. "You really think you can stop us?" he growled. Jake didn't flinch. He looked the man square in the eyes and said, "If I have to." The air was thick with tension. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped, as if everyone on that street was holding their breath, waiting to see who would make the next move. The leader of the bikers leaned back slightly, his smirk replaced by a more serious expression. He could see Jake wasn't bluffing, and that only seemed to agitate him more. He motioned to one of the other bikers, a younger guy with tattoos running up his arms, who immediately stepped forward. "Why don't we show him what happens when people get in our way?" the leader said, his voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. The younger biker cracked his knuckles, clearly ready to intimidate Jake further. But Jake didn't move. His calmness wasn't just unnerving, it was deliberate. He had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to diffuse a volatile situation was to stay composed, no matter how much the other side tried to provoke him. As the tension grew, a faint voice called out from one of the houses, "Leave him alone." It was a boy, no older than 10, standing at the edge of his front yard. His mother quickly pulled him back inside, but the moment wasn't lost on Jake or the bikers. "Looks like you've got fans," the leader sneered. Too bad they won't be able to help you. Jake glanced at the house where the boy had been, a flicker of determination in his eyes. This isn't just about me, he said, his voice steady. You're scaring people who did nothing to you. That's not strength, that's cowardice. The bikers bristled at the word. The younger one stepped even closer, his fists clenched. For a second, it looked like he was about to lunge at Jake, but then the sound of distant sirens broke through the tension, faint but growing louder with each passing second. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them shifted nervously, their bravado faltering. Did you call the cops? One of them demanded. Jake didn't answer. He simply stood there, unshaken, as the sound of the sirens drew closer. The leader scowled, clearly torn between standing his ground and retreating. The question now wasn't just about power, it was about who would back down first. Just as the sirens seemed ready to round the corner, they abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was jarring, and the bikers exchanged confused glances. The leader smirked, his confidence returning. Looks like they're not coming after all, he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. Guess we've got more time to deal with you. But Jake didn't flinch. If anything, his expression became even calmer, as if he had expected this. What the bikers didn't know was that Jake had sent a text to someone just before stepping outside, a fellow veteran who lived 2 streets over. This wasn't just any friend. It was someone Jake had served with during his time in the army, someone who knew exactly how to handle situations like this. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from the end of the street. At first, it was hard to tell where they were coming from, but they grew louder with every second. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, his presence commanding. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but the way he carried himself made it clear he wasn't an average civilian. Everything okay here, Jake? The man asked, his voice calm but firm. The bikers turned to see who had spoken, their smirks fading as they took in the newcomer. The leader's confidence wavered for a split second before he barked, "Who's this?" "Another one-up hero." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "Meet Mike. He's not big on introductions, but let's just say he's someone you don't want to underestimate." Mike stepped closer, his eyes scanning the group of bikers. "I think it's time you all moved along," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The leader bristled, but before he could respond, another sound filled the air, this time unmistakable. Several neighbors, emboldened by Mike's arrival, had stepped outside, forming a quiet but noticeable presence along the sidewalks. Their phones were out, recording everything, and their collective silence spoke volumes. The bikers were now outnumbered, their intimidation tactics unraveling. But the leader, stubborn and unwilling to back down, clenched his fists, clearly ready to make one last stand. The stakes had never been higher, and the moment of reckoning was imminent. The leader of the bikers clenched his fists tighter, his frustration boiling over. He glared at Jake, then at Mike, and finally at the growing crowd of neighbors who had stepped outside, their quiet defiance adding to the tension. For a moment, it seemed like he might lash out, refusing to let go of whatever point he thought he was proving. "You think you've won?" He spat, his voice trembling with anger. "You think I'm just gonna walk away?" Jake took a small step forward, his calm demeanor unshaken. "It's not about winning," he said firmly. "It's about doing the right thing. You've got a choice to make, right now. Don't make one you'll regret." The leader hesitated, his bravado cracking just enough for doubt to creep in. Behind him, the younger biker who had spoken up earlier nudged his arm. "Come on, man," he said in a low voice. "This isn't worth it. Let's go." The leader's scowl deepened, but the sound of his crew's shifting unease, and the steady, unyielding presence of Jake and Mike, finally got to him. With a loud, frustrated growl, he turned and kicked at the ground. "Fine," he barked. "We're leaving, but don't think this is over." As the bikers mounted their bikes and began to rev their engines, a low rumble came from behind the crowd. The sound of another motorcycle echoed down the street, growing louder until a sleek black bike appeared. Its rider, clad in full gear, slowed to a stop near the edge of the scene. Removing the helmet revealed a sharp-eyed woman, her expression a mix of calm authority and quiet strength. She dismounted, walking straight toward the group with deliberate confidence. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The leader froze, recognizing her immediately. It was someone he clearly hadn't expected to see, someone he knew from a past run-in that hadn't gone in his favor. His arrogance crumbled as the woman's presence alone sent a clear message. There would be no second chances this time. Without another word, the bikers sped off into the distance, their once menacing presence now reduced to fading echoes. As the street fell silent, the neighbors erupted in quiet relief. Jake turned to the woman, raising an eyebrow. "Nice timing," he said. She smiled faintly. "I had a feeling you'd need a little backup." The neighborhood returned to its calm, but the memory of what had unfolded lingered. A powerful reminder that courage, unity, and doing what's right can stand up to even the most intimidating threats.